This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Support Today I found out and get unlimited access to all of Brilliant's in-depth maths and science courses. Head over to brilliant.org/brainfood to get 20% off their annual premium subscription. More on them in a bit. If we were to play a word association game where I said a word and you had to yell out the first color that came to your mind, it'd probably go something like this: banana, yellow, apple, red, boy, blue, girl, pink. We can all understand why yellow and red are associated with bananas and apples, but boys are not blue and girls are not pink. So why are these colors so very much associated with these genders? Gender identification by color began in the early 20th century in the Western world. Before this, pink and blue did not hold any gender-specific connotations, and there are numerous examples of men wearing pink outfits and girls wearing blue. One French author, Xavier de Maistre, in his work A Journey Around My Room, published in 1794, even recommended that men choose to paint their rooms pink and white to improve the mood. Fast forward to the early 20th century and this began to change. When it did, starting just before the 1920s, pink was deemed by many guides to be more appropriate for boys and blue for girls, although this wasn't even remotely as popular as the pink is for girls, blue is for boys association that exists today. Many people just completely ignored the gender recommendations altogether. One of the earliest references to this original color scheme appeared in a June of 1918 edition of the trade publication Earnshaw's Infants Department. It read, "The generally accepted rule is pink for the boys and blue for the girls. The reason is that pink, being a more decided and stronger color, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl." In 1927, Time magazine printed a chart highlighting gender-appropriate colors for girls and boys, according to leading US retailers. Valens in Boston, Best & Co. in New York City, Halle's in Cleveland, and Marshall Field in Chicago all advised parents to dress boys in pink and girls in blue. But why did they care at all? Well, it's generally thought that this was simply because if parents followed such a color scheme, they would have to buy a whole new wardrobe and set of baby accessories in the appropriate color if they had a boy and a girl at some point, rather than just going with reusing the one set for both as before. For reasons unknown, this all started to change around the 1940s when clothing manufacturers decided on pink for girls and blue for boys. It has been suggested that boys simply like blue more and girls like pink more, but studies to date trying to see if this is true have come up with mixed results, except firmly showing that the vast majority of humans prefer blue to pink, and pink is actually one of the adult world's least favorite colors. As you might imagine, it's difficult to perform large-scale studies to determine if boys and girls are naturally predisposed to one color or another without the introduction of existing learned color biases, even in countries that don't popularly follow the girl pink, boy blue scheme. Whatever the case, the women's liberation movement of the 1960s and 1970s saw a resurgence of more unisex or perceived gender-neutral clothing colors. In fact, in the 1970s, the Sears and Roebuck catalog even went 2 full years without showing any toddler wearing pink, in stark contrast to a couple of decades before. But these gender-neutral efforts, they were undermined with advancements in prenatal testing, where parents could find out the gender of their baby before needing to buy clothes and accessories. Once again, manufacturers and retailers started pushing hard for the pink for girls and blue for boys phenomenon that continues to be entrenched in our society today. So what did people do before this color association? Well, prior to the invention of cheap chemical dyes that allowed clothes to be washed in hot water over and over again with minimal fading, most infants were simply dressed in white for everyday life and sometimes in random colors for more formal occasions, with no one color being favored for boys or girls. Regardless of color, in both cases they wore dresses. For instance, consider this picture of a young boy who would grow up to be the President of the United States. Who's that? That's Franklin D. Roosevelt. Going back to dresses, why did they pick white dresses? Well, white was easy to bleach, and at least in the beginning, changing diapers is much easier in dresses than pants. Further, with children growing rapidly, dresses were a bit more practical in terms of not needing to get the sizing as precise. Even beyond the diaper stage, which was discarded much earlier back then, gender differences were not highlighted until children were much older. In fact, it wasn't at all uncommon to have both boys and girls wear dresses or short skirts until the age of 5 or 6. In the early 20th century, as noted, this began to change. Beyond the introduction of more colors and loose guidelines about which color went with which, boys started wearing garb associated with men at a younger and younger age, resulting in a shift away from dresses and a move towards pants. A similar significant shift happened during the women's liberation movement, but instead of going back to dressing boys in the more convenient dresses, many started dressing their girls the same as boys, in pants. Of course, today, for many in the Western world, girls wear pink dresses and boys wear blue pants. Period. This curious phenomenon is so firmly entrenched that if you tried to dress a 2-year-old boy in a pink dress, regardless of the child perhaps having a traditional male hairstyle with male-centric accessories hinting that your toddler is a boy, absolutely no one would think that they were looking at a male child until you told them so. And when you did tell them, you're probably going to get some funny looks. Now, just before we get into the bonus facts today, I do want to tell you about Brilliant. Brilliant are a problem-solving website and app with a hands-on approach. You can use Brilliant to achieve your STEM goals one little bit at a time. You'll expand your knowledge of the world through interactive puzzles. Brilliant's courses teach through storytelling, interactive challenges, and problem-solving. Brilliant, as always, they're improving their platform, and there's brand new interactive content recently, including updates to their logic course as well as mathematical fundamentals. Or if you want something completely new, Brilliant have a course all about search engines, which will teach you how search engines like Google work, the behind-the-scenes stuff, how they find the information you need from the billions of websites out there in just a fraction of a second. Look, Brilliant is a great complement to watching educational videos like this one, and it will really help you master complex and technical subjects. So if you want to support Today I Found Out and get unlimited access to all of Brilliant's in-depth maths and science courses, head on over to brilliant.org/brainfood and you'll get 20% off your annual subscription. And let's get into those bonus facts. Through most of history, and still today in many countries in Africa and Asia particularly, the average age a child would be fully daytime potty trained was typically around 18 months old, instead of about double that today in the Western world. The change began to happen around the mid-20th century, thanks to the introduction of disposable diapers and heavy marketing campaigns from the manufacturers, which included widely promoted, sponsored, so-called scientific studies that showed that it was bad for the child to potty train earlier. Sometimes this is still repeated today even by doctors, despite a complete lack of evidence supporting such a notion. With the effort needed to potty train the traditional way over waiting and the relative ease and cleaner nature of disposable diapers over having to wash cloth ones, people didn't take much convincing to simply wait until the child was much older and showed an active interest in potty training. However, recently, with advancements in diaper technology and pull-ups, this has started to become a bit more of a problem, mainly environmental, but also sometimes financial, as kids show interest in potty training later and later. For reference, in 1957 in America, it was typical to start potty training at 12 months old, with the vast majority of children fully daytime potty trained within 6 to 12 months of that, and nighttime potty trained by 3 years old. Today, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the average is to start potty training at 24 to 25 months old, achieving daytime potty training at 36 months old and nighttime around 5 to 6 years old. You may also have heard that sometimes humans are born with tails, but is this actually true? Well, to some extent, the answer to the question of whether some humans are born with tails depends on your definition of a tail. For instance, a variety of things may protrude from the tailbone of a newborn, including cysts, tumors, or even a parasitic twin, but very rarely is a human born with an actual extra appendage that is generally considered a vestigial tail. During fetal development, the human embryo at about the 5th week has a tail that usually disappears by the 8th week, being absorbed by the growing embryo. However, for a rare few, the tail is not absorbed and persists through birth. Typically, for those exceptionally few born with tails, the appendage in question is comprised of adipose and connective tissue, bundles of striated muscle, and even nerves and blood vessels. Noticeably absent from even a vestigial tail, however, are any signs of vertebrae or controlled movement. As for specific examples, in 2012 there was the paper Spectrum of Human Tails, a report of 6 cases which detailed the experience of a handful of patients with vestigial tails ranging in age from 3 days to 2 years. Of the 6, 4 of the tails were situated in the lumbar area, and perhaps not surprisingly, 3 of the patients had spinal bifida, a congenital defect where the lower part of the spinal cord is exposed through a hole in the spine. One child had a tail protruding from his buttock, while the last had a protrusion from the sacral region. 5 of of the 6 had no connection between their tails and their spines, and they underwent successful surgeries to remove the unwanted appendages. The 6th's parents refused to give consent, although it's not clear why, and the doctors in question were not able to follow up with that child. Notably, in one of the children, her tail unusually included bone as well as cartilage, fat, and neural tissue. And if you're curious, the longest human tail on record is generally credited to Chandra Oram, whose extra appendage, which many argue doesn't constitute a true tail, rings in at about 13 inches long. If you guessed his refusal to have his very hairy appendage removed has interfered with his love life, you'd be absolutely correct. He did finally get married in 2007, but his wife is less than pleased with it. To quote, "He doesn't look good. My mother and father passed away when I was young. My brothers wanted me to get married, so I had to compromise and marry him." Ouch. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every other week. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Brilliant. They're linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.